for the better part of almost 3 years. So it started in kind of like March, April of 2020 is when the demand or the inventory started to fall off. Prior to 2020, whoever's been in the business, did anybody have a problem getting their buyers under contract and competing in multiple offers? Hardly ever. It was occasional. There'd be a really great property undervalued, priced undervalued, that there was a large percentage of buyers wanting to purchase it. But now it's more common on pretty much every property. Everybody agree with that? And over the last couple of years, it was, even if it was priced out of the realm of what we thought they could get, they were still getting it. So now it's softened a little bit, but we're still haven't seen inventory really rise, and we don't know when that'll happen. So chances are we could be fighting this for quite a while. So we need to be able to do whatever we can to structure our offers to make it as competitive as possible. We're competing against 24 different offers. We need to stand out. So I want to talk with Nettie and Joe a little bit about what they're doing in their business, and even on their listings, what they're seeing other agents do to stand out from the competition. So I think it all starts really with, from the beginning with your buyers. When your buyer first reaches out and says, I'm ready to buy a home, what do you guys do when you just start setting expectations?
So the biggest thing that we do is a buyer's consultation. So everybody should do that with your buyers, because I think there's kind of like 3 categories of buyers, especially in this market. There's the weak buyers, the buyers that can barely get approved and are like, they might need closing costs, or they might, just need a first-time home buyers program where they're kind of on edge. And you have the medium buyers where they're solid, but they're not like, they don't have a ton of cash maybe, and they can't, waive a bunch of contingencies. And then you have your very strong buyers that are, willing to really do whatever, and they have a ton of cash, and they can even sometimes pay cash. So I think it's important to, when you have that buyer's consultation, try to figure out, you'll find that out too, once you get them through the approval process on, hey, how strong can they go on financing? Are they a first-time home buyer? Are they super nervous about this, and have they never done it before? Or is this their 3rd or 4th home and they're super comfortable and they're willing to be a little bit riskier? So I think it's extremely important to have that, because if you don't, then you're just going to show them the first house. They're going to fall in love with that house. And you're going to find out, hey, I need $10,000 in closing costs or $5,000 in closing costs. And that house has 5 offers. And what's going to happen? They're not going to get the house, and they're going to be super disappointed and say, oh man, this is horrible. I absolutely love this house, and you told me I could get it, and I didn't get it. And that's just going to, you're going to repeat that process over and over again with them. And then eventually, maybe after showing them 30 houses and writing 10 offers, they'll eventually learn that, oh, okay, maybe I can't look at these houses in this price range, and maybe I have to lower that price range. So super important to have a buyer's consultation and figure out how strong your buyer is and categorize them properly. That way you can have that conversation and create the narrative that, hey, these are the homes that we should look at, or this is what the situations are going to turn out like based on how strong you are as a buyer.
Good information. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and to piggyback on that, you need to set the, let them know what the market is like, because this is a crazy market that they may have to go over asking price. They may have to pull out the appraisal, inspections, things like that. So you have to explain this market. I've never seen a market like this crazy in the 20 years I've been doing it.
So who does buyer consultations with their buyers every time? Very important, right? Yeah, I'm guilty of it as past too. Like it's hit or miss. When I started doing that though, that's when you can really set the expectations, as they just mentioned here. Because we often see, like, who's heard of the realtor that's been like, oh, I showed these people 50 homes. Yeah, right? Like, that's not cool. That's not like something to be proud of. You're at that point, you're not making any money. Because if you had to show them 50 homes, then one, we're not listening, or we didn't ask the right questions, because we're just showing them whatever they send us. So we never really figured out what's important to them in their process or in their purchase. And that's one of the things that's super important with the buyer consultation, is asking them, what are 3 things that you absolutely must have in your next home? So what are 3 non-negotiables that you absolutely must have? And then go deep on it. Well, I have to have a 3-car garage. What's important about a 3-car garage? And uncover, because then I say, well, I've got my wife's car, my car, and we have this specialty car that we have to have a garage. Well, now we know that that's an absolute must-have. Now, when they send you homes that have a 2-car garage, we need to talk to them and say, okay, hey, great. I know when we sat down at our buyer consultation, you said that the 3-car garage was very important because of the classic car. It needs to be garage. Did you get rid of the car? No, we still have it. Okay, great. Now we don't want to go show them that property. So we have to uncover those things, because what we're going to do is show them that property. They're going to say it's fantastic, but it only has a 2-car garage. All right. And so there are a lot of realtors that will just go show whatever and not really uncover what's important to their buyer and really set the expectations. So if you haven't done buyer consultations, it's super important that we do, to set the expectations and to explain the market right now. Explain the market we're in. And keep in mind too, real estate is very local. So just because across the MLS, we have a 2-month supply of inventory in a very strong seller's market, is it like that in every market, every price point? No, it's not. When we get into upper price points, there might be more inventory. When we get into certain areas, there might be more inventory. So knowing that real estate is very local, we have to really study the market and see how many homes are active, how many are under contract, how many have sold in the last 90 days, to really educate our buyers on what the market looks like right now. So we have to be a student of the real estate market ourselves to really articulate that to our potential buyers so we can set them up to win. Because right now, if we just say, yeah, we'll start sending you some houses, let us know when you see something, then we're going to go out and show properties. They're not going to be prepared maybe that they're going to have to do things and take things out of the contract that maybe they weren't aware of. And you don't want to have that conversation when they find a home. Hey, now all of a sudden you're going to pay $25 and we're asking, what? Where if we can set that expectation ahead of time, then we're going to be able to run through the process more smoothly. So you're having a good buyer consultation. You would say that's the first step and the most important thing to start the process. Now you get out and start looking for homes. Now, what happens once they find a home? What are you doing? They're like, hey, we love this house. We want to write a contract.
Full counts.
Okay. Are you doing that beforehand, during? What are we doing?
I do it after. I do it when they're ready to write a contract. Otherwise, I'll be wasting my time.
Yeah, pulling a lot of accounts. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, so usually like first thing I'll do immediately, like as soon as I get in my car, right when I'm outside and buyers leaves, I'll reach out to the agent immediately. I'll try to call them. Sometimes they answer, sometimes they don't. Say 60% of agents don't answer their phone ever. So then you'll have to text them. So you just want to make sure you're in constant communication with them. Just like we always talk about with our clients, you want to stay in constant communication with them. You also want to stay in constant communication with the agent that you're trying to work with. So make sure immediately, once you find out that, hey, my buyers want to make an offer, you give them a call, you give them a text, and try to get a response as soon as possible. That way you can relay the message to your buyers that says, you know, hey, right now they have 10 offers, or right now they have 1 offer, or they have 0 offers. And hey, also, by the way, they're putting a 4 o'clock deadline by Monday to have your offers in. How can we be strategic about this? Instead of just, because a lot of realtors, what they'll do is they'll just show the house, their clients will say, hey, I want to make an offer. Great, they'll drive home, they'll get out the laptop, they'll send them an offer, and they'll submit the offer. They'll text the agent, or they'll send an email, hey, just sent you an offer, let me know if you got it. And then they get an email 2 days later and say, hey, sorry, we went with another offer. Has anybody seen people do that before? Exactly. It's not a winning strategy, and you're not really working for your client. You're just kind of doing the bare minimum. So make sure it's important that once you have that conversation, you go back to your clients. And like you said, Nettie, you look at the comparables, especially if the realtor says, hey, we have 10 offers right now. So obviously that house is going to go over asking price. So look at all the homes, and typically you'll have to go sometimes in the school district to see all the homes in that school district that have sold, and what homes have sold over asking price. They're the same 1-story, 2-story, same style of home, same bedroom, same bathroom, same lot size, and see where they selling for over asking, and then average that number and then lay it out to the buyers and say, hey, this is what you could expect this home to possibly go for. And of course, every home has unique features, and some buyers might like this home more than they like the last home that sold for 5%. So there's a chance this home could go for 6% over asking. So it's important to lay out all the stats to your clients and let them know that, hey, these are the possibilities here with this home based on the situation and the information that I got from the realtor.
So what questions are you asking the agent when you call them?
So one of the biggest questions that most people don't ask is what's important in an offer to the sellers besides price. Because sometimes price, we always think that price is the motivating factor for sellers, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes people want an extremely quick closing, or sometimes people don't want any inspections. So it's really important to hear the key details. And I've had odd things too, where it's like, hey, they want the refrigerator. Like they absolutely need the refrigerator. They don't want to get it. So there's rare cases. And if you just kind of skip over that question, you could have things in your offer where maybe you have a 60-day closing and they need a 70-day closing or something of that sort. And even if your offer is a little bit higher in price, you can still miss out on the house just because you didn't ask that question. Hey, what's important to the seller and what can I include in this offer to really help the seller out? So make sure you ask that question, because it doesn't always come down to price. Most of the time it does, but there are specific situations where sellers care more about certain aspects.
A seller might be building, and it might be a 4-month build that they need. So it's not always a quick closing to the sellers.
Yeah, that's a mistake a lot of people make. They think they assume 30-day closing is best, and it's really not, especially if you have sellers, to your point, that are building. Somebody that's lived in the home for 20 years, they need time. So being able to structure and potentially doing a seller lease back, where the buyer can close on their home, seller can lease the property back. Maybe that's included, but they lease it back for free for a certain period of months. it's all gonna be based on the tolerance of your buyer as well and what they're willing to do, but the better we can structure deals that way to make it more incentivized for the seller, the better off we're going to be. But we don't know that unless we have a really detailed conversation with the agent, because to Joe's point as well, it's not always just price. Price is ultimately one of the driving factors, but terms as well. I think another important thing is to be willing to show your buyer's hand and let them know my buyer is extremely interested in this property. To do within reason whatever we can to get the property accepted. Because oftentimes if you can appeal, they might get an offer from a private investor company that's a cash offer that is maybe significantly over asking price, but now they know that your client is a family, this or that. Now with the guidelines and all, they be careful, but you just let them know, I've got a buyer, they really want this house for the family, they can see themselves raising their children. You can appeal to the emotional side in a lot of ways in that as well. I think just willing to show your buyer's hand is not like in the past, we didn't want to do that when we had plenty of homes to choose from, but now we have to do whatever we can to be competitive to be able to make the offer accepted. So having a really good detailed conversation, I think, is extremely important. Now, if you know the terms and kind of what the seller is looking for, how are you educating your buyers on what they should do to structure their offer?
So number one, I'm going over those comparables with them and showing them like, hey, as far as price goes, we need to be somewhere in this realm, whether it's like 5% over, 6% or even 10% over. So number one, you want to address the price issue and where they need to be with price, and also need to make sure that they're able to do that and willing to do that. And then number two, you want to have that conversation about, hey, there's 10 offers right now. And I spoke with the agent and they said the most important factor to the seller is they want a 60-day closing, or they want a 30-day lease back after closing. So making sure you convey that to them, that it's very important. And it's not something that they can say, oh, I don't really want to do that, because you have to convey to them that if they don't do that, they're probably not going to get the house. And you have to have conversation with them on, hey, if you don't get this house, how will that make you feel? And they're going to say, oh, I really love this house. Absolutely. We need to do whatever we can to get this house. And this is what the agent conveyed to me, that the seller is really wanting to offer.
Yeah, very important. So being able to have a good conversation and then start pulling things out now. Now, your buyer's tolerance is going to be different on waiving inspections, waiving appraisal, different things like that. So that's why it's very important to know too, how strongly qualified is our buyer. So as Joe mentioned, if we have a first-time home buyer that's maybe FHA 3.5% down and they don't have a lot of available cash, well, doing a gap appraisal and covering the difference in appraisal might not be a good option for that buyer. So we don't want to set our buyers up to lose. So it's very important that we know all of the ins and outs of their financing, how the strength of their financing is, so we can be able to structure that offer. Because we're seeing a lot where people will waive appraisal, or people are willing to cover a certain dollar amount over appraisal. That's things you can throw in. Now, what are other things you're seeing right now too? I know with inspections is a big one. Waiving inspections completely, or saying we're going to do inspections and we'll only ask for certain items over a certain dollar amount. So maybe it's like anything over $2,000, we'll ask for. Anything under that, the buyer will take care of. What else are you seeing right now?
Still escalation clauses like we've seen for the last 2 years that haven't gone away. Yeah, I think a big one is just waiving the appraisal, waiving financing contingency. That's a huge one, because that always makes a big difference on when sellers see there's a possibility, there's another hurdle that we have to deal with versus there's not. So that's a big one too. And also making sure that when you have these conversations with your buyer, that you kind of future pace the outcome of each scenario on, hey, if this happens, this could be the outcome. For example, say they decide to waive the appraisal rider, they put an offer in for 500 and the house appraises for 475. Hey buyer, if this house for some reason appraises for 475, I hope you do realize that you would need to bring an extra $25,000 to the closing table on top of the down payment and the closing costs. Are you okay? And do you have the funds to be able to do that? And if they say, yeah, absolutely, then I would also make sure that they can provide some sort of proof of funds, whether it's an investment account, a bank account, whatever that might look like, so that you can even send over to the realtor as well to, show them some proof and some solid proof that they can actually afford to do that.
I think for well-qualified buyers as well, if they have the cash, let's say in an investment accounts, IRAs, things like that, you can write them as a cash buyer, because in our contract, it states that you can still finance any portion of it. So if they have the means to be able to purchase cash, then you can write it as a cash buyer and they can still finance that as well. So it's structuring different things like that based on knowing what their financial situation is and based on their tolerance of how willing they are and competitive they're willing to be. But if they could just liquidate their IRAs, now keep in mind there's tax consequences with that. But that's a way to structure the offer. If they're a well-qualified borrower and they have enough money to pay the house cash, chances are the approval process is gonna go fairly smooth, especially if they're kind of fully underwritten. I think that's another thing too, is keeping in mind that how far into the pre-approval process are our borrowers? Have they just kind of done an income verification or just said, hey, I make X and you pulled credit? Or have they gone through the process with the lender to get underwritten prior to going out and making offers? Because the stronger they are as well, that's information you can relay to your listing agent as well. Listen, they're a very well qualified borrower. They've been fully underwritten through the pre-approval process, and there's going to be no issues with financing. So being able to have those conversations with the agent ahead of time to where you can,
Is everybody doing that now? The underwriting part,
I think you should be. Yeah,
especially if it's FHA, you have to do that.
yeah, right. Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's super important that we're doing that. I think another thing too with borrowers is looking at properties maybe that have been sitting on the market a little bit. So especially if we have borrowers that are first-time home buyers that don't have a lot of extra cash, you can't pay cash, you can't waive a lot of things. Find properties that have been sitting out there that are a little bit overpriced that you might be able to make lower offers on. Because maybe their agent hasn't done a good job of educating them that they need to make an adjustment on price, but the property's been sitting there for 30 days. In this market, if the property's been sitting there for 30 days, why hasn't it sold? Most likely it's price. It's just overpriced, but maybe they're willing to take less. Like even companies like I bought a house recently for myself, Opendoor. It was sitting out there for 4 months. I was able to get like 30,000 off the listing price, and I got another 10 or 12,000 off inspections as well. So letting our buyers know that we could maybe go in low on some of these company-owned properties that are just sitting there for months and months and months that aren't selling simply because they haven't lowered the price, but they might be willing to take a lesser price. So I think that's a key factor too, is find stuff that's sitting out there for a little bit. Because we know if a home goes on the market today with the limited inventory, chances are if it's priced in the realm of reality, it's probably going to sell. So
One thing I was gonna mention too, and it'll save you a lot of time, so say you have a buyer, looking at a specific school district and they're approved for up to, say, like $300,000. And one thing you'll wanna do is look in that area or that neighborhood or wherever they're looking and see what the average list to sell price ratio is. Because if it's over 100%, chances are you're not gonna wanna show them $300,000 homes. You're gonna probably go at least 5, 10, maybe even 15 or 20% less than what they're approved to based on the area that they're looking. So even though they're a $300K buyer, you might have to show them $250,000 houses or $260,000 houses. So it's important to have that conversation with people, because just because they're approved for a certain price doesn't mean that they can look at listings for that price. They can probably look at listings under whatever percentage the average is in the area.
good point. Very good point. Yeah. Who's had challenges recently with offers, putting them in, getting them accepted? Go ahead.
Yeah, so at Big J,
Mhm.
but we have gone through underwriting, so at least we had that for us. But, as far as any additional funds, to be able to go over,
Mhm.
extremely limited.
Yeah.
The last one, we didn't, well, so like you mentioned the appraisal gap, that's one, at least if it looks like, and even speaking to an agent, believe it or not, on the property was a new build. She was saying she was getting appraisals all over. She goes, sometimes it's low and sometimes it's where it should be. She goes, I just, it's been really difficult. So, it's scary. So you have to do I had to do the math with her, but then there's not that much. So
Right. Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Yes.
Family. Did I mention you family?
Yeah.
They're the hardest.
Well, and it makes you feel bad too, because it makes you feel like we're doing something that we're not getting these offers accepted. And it's going to be a challenge regardless. If there's 25 other offers out there, and a handful of them are maybe attached offers, it's going to be difficult to compete with that if we're an FHA buyer doing 3.5% down that's not super well qualified. So thinking about that and knowing that, to Joe's point, we have to be looking at knowing the area and knowing that people are paying over asking for the majority of the homes. So looking at list to sale price ratios and really educating our buyers on that maybe we do need to look at a little bit lesser bracket to be able to have a little bit more flexibility to go up in price. So to your point, if we're pre-approved 300, we should be looking at something maybe a little bit less because we're going to have to compete. So I think it's extremely important that we're educating our buyers on that ahead of time, because what's going to happen too is if we go out and show 10 or 15 homes and we write 5, 6, 7 offers and don't get it accepted, what are they going to do? If they're currently renting right now, chances are they're going to get frustrated and they're going to say, you know what, we're going to rent for another year. So we have to be able to really set the expectations and educate them as well as we can so they know going into this what the process looks like, that it's not just going to be we're going to find a house, put it in. Back in the day in 08 and 09, you could find a house, sit on it for a week and think about it and then make an offer because the house would still be there. because there's 11 months of inventory. It's a totally different market right now. So anything else from a creative standpoint that you're doing or that maybe you've seen on your listings that have stood out?
Yeah, one thing I was gonna say, just communication is key, like I mentioned earlier, as soon as you get done showing the house, you wanna reach out to them. But not only, that's not the only point you wanna reach out to them, you wanna reach out to them as well as when you're writing the offer, you wanna say, hey, I'm going to be submitting an offer. Just wanna check back again and see how many offers you have, because obviously with this market, if houses are getting, 10, 20, 30 offers, they could be coming in every single hour, every 30 minutes. So you wanna make sure that, because if you call them right after you show the house, and you don't write the offer until, 2 hours later or 4 hours later, there's a solid chance that they could have gotten, 3 more offers or 2 more offers. So you want to check again right before you write that offer. Say, hey, just wanted to check in again, let you know I'm going to be submitting an offer. How many offers do you have currently? I know when we last spoke, you mentioned you had 2. Is it still a 2 or has it gone up from there? So you want to, and then you want to circle back to your clients too and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I just talked with the agent again, and now they have 4 offers. Is there anything you want to do maybe to make this offer even stronger than it already is, just because we're going to have to compete with more offers now? So it's a great conversation to have. And then as soon as you submit that offer, once again, you're going to be reaching out to the agent. You really want to call them too, just because they're getting bombarded by so many agents. And a lot of people like to just text because it's super easy and super inconvenient to do, or super convenient to do, I should say. So make sure you call, because it really leaves a different type of impression on an agent versus just texting. Because if there's 20 agents reaching out to them, I guarantee probably 10 to 15 of them are all sending text. So make sure you call, and then it doesn't hurt to text as well. So just making sure that you have that open flow of communication throughout the entire process, and then basically every step that you do. So basically after you show the house, right when you submit the offer, right after you submit the offer, and then even sometimes too, say it's like a 24-hour deadline, I'll check in with them every, 4 to 6 hours or so. Yes, you might think you sound like a pastor or annoying, but you're not really working for that listing agent. You're working for your client. So who really cares if you sound annoying, because the end goal is to get your client's offer accepted. So if you keep following up with them constantly every, 3-4 hours, that agent's going to know that you really want the house, or your clients really want the house. And sometimes they'll give you some grace and say, hey, if you bump your client's offer up $4,000, you can get the house. And it's happened to me before, but it's just having that persistence to just keep constantly following up with the agent until they break or crack and just kind of share with you, this is where you need to be, and you'll get the house. Because the listing agent's intention is to get their client the most amount of money. And if they're doing that, then they should be helping you as well with your buyers get as high as they can to give them the most amount of money.
Yeah, I think it's important too from a communication standpoint. Like, agents want to work with agents that know will help facilitate and get the deal done as well. So if you're persistent in keeping up communication and you're responsive, that's going to send a good signal to the agent that, okay, this is a likable person, somebody that should be easy to work with. Their goal is to get the house for their buyer, so we can push this to the closing line and get it closed, the finish line and get it closed. So I think it's important to have that relationship, because I know from a lot of listings we have here, agents will get 10 offers and 8 of them won't even call. It's just an offer sent and there's been no conversation behind it, nothing. And so it's one of the things where it's like, well, if this 2 agents here are constantly communicating and staying in touch, your buyers obviously really want the property, and they're willing to do what they have to get the property to get it purchased. So it makes it for a better transaction as well. So don't just send the offer and just kind of fingers crossed and hope we hear. I would say another thing too is that you'll see a lot of things where it will say sellers will be, this goes on Listing Live on Thursday, seller will be evaluating all offers Monday at 6 p.m. I would not wait. I would send the offer in as quickly as possible, because how many times does it happen with the property? They say that it goes live Thursday, it's under contract on Friday. Good offer came in, seller said, you know what, I don't have to wait. It's a great offer. It's fake. So if you see that, advise your buyers, let's not wait. Let's get into the property immediately. We don't necessarily have until Monday at 6. Sometimes they will wait, but a lot of times they're accepting it if a good offer comes in. So with the escalation clause, I think it's important too that you put your best foot forward as well. So if your buyers are willing to prepare, escalation clauses are great, but if your buyers are willing to prepare to pay more, and they're like, we want this house, we want to do what we have to, submit that offer immediately, even if it says we're going to wait until Monday to evaluate. Because if a good offer comes in, it happens all the time with sellers. They're like, we don't want to wait. And typically a buyer's motivation is the strongest when they first put the offer. So this is a good thing to think about for your listings as well, is that every day that goes by that buyer waits, their motivation starts to lessen. And they start, they're excited, they walk into the property, they're like, we want to do whatever we have to do to get this house. They might overpay for the property. And so if you have a listing, and now every day that goes by, they're talking to family members, they're talking to friends. People are like, I heard this other property that's going to come on the market. their motivation lessens, where maybe now by the time Monday comes, they rescind their offer. So make sure that it goes both ways with the buyers and listings, that don't wait until Monday, put that offer in immediately, make it as strong as possible, because chances are they might accept it. And that's happened too, like didn't it happen to you recently, where they said that Monday,
Yeah.
put it on a Thursday,
Yeah.
went under contract Thursday night. Offer came in, seller said, take it.
Yeah.
It's a good offer, not waiting.
And they don't always write in the MLS, but they reserve the right to pull an offer at any time.
You're starting to see that a little bit
Yeah.
more, but
I
yeah,
had a question about that, actually. I thought if it was advertised in MLS that way, that they had to honor it. Like,
they
is
do,
that
but they
not
don't,
today?
yeah.
So, I mean, you could fight back, I guess.
You
but-
could, but that's the challenge, is that they're supposed to.
They're gonna say, what the agent's gonna say is my seller wanted to accept it. I
Yeah.
gotta do what my seller wanted.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
So you're starting to see it more where it'll say they reserve the right to accept any offer at any time, even though this says the deadline. But yeah, I would always encourage, if your buyers, put it in immediately. Yeah. So any other questions, challenges, or anything else you're seeing right now? I think a big one too is explaining escalation clauses to listing agents, because listing agents don't always understand them. So I think having that conversation and really letting them know about this is what they're prepared to go to is very important. Because you'll see some agents that'll say, we're not dealing with escalation clauses, and oftentimes it's just they don't really fully understand it. So if you do submit one, really explaining it to the agent, what it entails and how it works is very important, because a lot of people don't know.
and they're written in so many different ways too, different lingo.
What is that escalation?
So it's,
What we just talked about?
Yeah, I
Different.
can write it on. Do you know what, like basically what an escalation clause is?
No.
Okay, so basically say there's a house, it's listed for, say, 200,000. You talk to your clients and they're like, yeah, I absolutely love this house, I want to make an offer. The agent tells you, hey, we have 3 offers on the house right now.
Mhm.
So say the clients are, basically what you would do is you have your initial offer very strong. Usually I'd say a little bit over asking price of the minimum. So say your initial offer would be 210. So basically what the escalation clause does is you talk to your sellers and they say, hey, what's the most you'd be willing to pay for this house? And they say, the most I'd be willing to pay would be 230. So what the escalation clause basically states is that if any other offer comes in that's over 210, that you'll beat that offer by a certain dollar amount. So say, you put an offer in at 210 and someone else puts an offer in at 220. So usually what you put is a lot of agents will do $1,000. Some people will do $2,000. I'd probably suggest not doing $1,000 because everybody does it. So I'd probably make it kind of an odd number, like maybe $1,500 or $2,200, just something a little bit odd to potentially beat people. So basically what this does is if you had another offer for 220 and you had that escalation clause saying that you would pay $1,000 more than any other offer up to 230. So basically, as long as the offer was 229 or under, your client would technically be higher as far as price goes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
and I would recommend with that dollar amount, make it bigger.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, because like some people do $1, they used to do $1 over. If there's 2 competing offers and maybe one has better finance terms, $1 doesn't make a difference. But if it's $2,500 or $3,000 or even $5,000 more, that's a big enough number to catch sellers' attention. So like doing $100, even $1,000 to your point is not a lot. I would talk to them about increasing that price, $2,500, $3,000, $4,000, enough to make it a substantial difference in the seller's eyes to be like, well, their financing might not be as strong as this person that's putting 20% down, they're only putting 3.5% down, but we could get an extra $5,000. And I've had a good conversation with the realtor. They said they're, well pre-approved, well qualified. So things like that are very important with the escalation clause. I think another thing too with this is earnest money. So putting more earnest money down now as well is important. A lot of times the rule is about 1%, give or take. You'll still see agents that'll submit on a $400,000 or $500,000 home with $500 earnest money. It's not a whole lot. So upping that earnest money to a minimum 1%, maybe 1.5%, 2%, just to make it look like a stronger offer as well. I think it's very important. I think another thing too is shortening timeframes. So there are things you can be doing too, like writing on a special sales contract, maybe where you're waiving inspections completely. Or if you're writing on a normal sale contract, maybe you shorten the time frame. Instead of if you're going to do inspections instead of 10 days, shorten it to 3 days or 5 days or 2 days even. calling your home inspector ahead of time and asking what their availability is. Could they get out there tomorrow if this offer gets accepted? Maybe you can shorten your window to 2 days now instead of 10. And then the response, and then the period within there as well, we have to get it resolved, you shorten that also. So now the seller knows, like, even if this offer doesn't work out, we're not gonna be sitting off market for 10 or 15 days. We're gonna have this wrapped up and resolved in a day or two. Another thing would be finance contingencies. Even if you're doing a 30-day contingency, or let's say you're doing a 60-day contingency, don't push your finance contingency out to 45 days. Because now that's potential for the deal to fall apart in the seller's eyes. You know, they can sit off the market for a month and a half and the deal could still die. So maybe we talk to our lender and say, what's the fastest we can get this done to get loan commitment? And we shorten that window. Maybe it's 2 weeks. So even though the seller wanted a 60-day close, we have a 2-week loan commitment. So it's in the eyes of the sellers, it's lessening the contingencies and the time off market for the deal to die. Because nobody wants to wait, have a 60-day closing at day 45, like, oh, I can't get approved. So being able to lessen those timeframes, I think, is important as well. And then if you're willing to waive inspections, maybe your buyers cover occupancy. So if there's an occupancy inspection, maybe you write in there that the seller's not responsible, buyer will cover that, take care of that. It's just less things that the sellers have to do. Generally on occupancies too, a lot of it's safety issues. So if you're walking through the house and you see there's no glaring issues that would flag an occupancy, generally too, that there are things that you can set your buyer up to feel more comfortable with omitting from the contract. So I think things like that are very important. So I think that's why it's important too, as you're walking through the home, to be able to look and identify things in the property as well. Like I know, like one of our agents here offers a class where he walks through homes and teaches you everything you need to be looking for, like structural cracks. Like, again, we're not home inspectors, but the more we can be knowledgeable on the home finishings and that, the better off we are for our buyer as well. We can walk in and see immediately that a kitchen doesn't have GFIs, or bathrooms don't have GFIs, or there's not smoke detectors in the bedrooms, or things like that that would flag an occupancy. We can relay that to our sellers, because based on that, we might, depends on the tolerance of where we're at from omitting things from the contract. If you walk into a house and it's got horizontal cracks all around, we might not want to waive inspections.
And the
Right?
stab
So-
lock, electrical panels, those are very important to people when they see those. And the Federal Pacific.
Yeah, and Zinska,
Zenco, yeah,
yeah, those are all things that
Yeah,
won't
those
pass
three.
occupancy generally.
yeah.
So that's a couple $1,000 expense, $1,500 expense to your seller. But by knowing that and letting them know ahead of time that this most likely won't pass occupancy, they'll probably have to take care of this if they waive their occupancy.
You can also offer to pay the seller's closing costs, which is typically $300 to $500. And we'll pitch up over the next guy.
Well, and there are things too, like your offer the other day, right? That, yeah, so just talk through that one real quick.
Well, I had 2 offers on the property and they both had escalation clauses that were substantial. And then but the winning one, what she wrote in was 2,500 over the best offer. She waived all inspections, so not even doing it for information. Then no appraisal. And trying to remember it all, she lowered her commission to be on list price versus the escalation price. And then the last one was what was it? Oh, she's paying $1,000 in the closing costs
Did she make any?
towards the seller.
Did
So,
she make any money?
Oh, yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because she's still
Yeah,
waiting on
the price
400
point
day.
is,
That's
yeah.
it's just not the 40 or 50 over.
she, yeah, the agent only gave up like $1,500 of her commission, so she's still getting a nice check.
Oh.
But-
So that's ways to structure though, that makes it more incentive to the seller now. They're like, oh, wait a minute, now I don't have to pay commission on the overage. I'm gonna get $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 more for the property. They're waiving inspections. There's no finance contingency. I mean, that's a very well qualified borrower. And that's stuff you can be doing if you know your buyer's financial situation and to the extent of what they're comfortable with waiving. So that's why it all comes into place though, with having a good buyer consultation ahead of time, educating them on what the market is right now, what they may potentially need to be prepared to do to get offers accepted. With inspections as well, if you write for informational purposes only, shorten the windows, we're gonna write for informational purposes only, we're not gonna ask for anything. So you can omit things in the contract as well, to where there's no out necessarily on inspections. All things to just make it look more incentivized to the seller to say, okay, this is the offer I want to go with. Because even if you have 2 offers and they're very similar in price, and let's just say one's $5,000 more, but this other one's waived inspection contingencies where they shorten their windows and they've said, we're not gonna ask for anything under a certain dollar amount. Maybe that seller says, let's go with this offer because it looks more attractive, because we're not gonna have to worry about inspections and get nickel and dime after the fact. Any other thoughts or things you're doing right now, or things you've seen?
One thing I was gonna say, because I kind of talked about it earlier, the three categories of weak, the moderate, and the strong. So obviously, a lot of the stuff you can do with strong buyers. Well, let's say you have a weak buyer who's barely approved, FHA only has a few grand in the bank to put down for closing costs. So if you have that buyer, chances are you're probably not gonna be able to compete very much. So some of the things that you can do for that is try to find off-market properties. We talk about this all the time with our buyers. So, that could involve things like find the neighborhood that they want to live in. You go and door knocking. You just say, hey, I have a buyer that wants to live in the neighborhood. Just curious if you or any of your neighbors are considering selling. You can do that on the phone as well. You can call neighborhoods. And you can also post on, Facebook, different social media platforms to try to let people know that, hey, I have a buyer looking in this area. And then also don't be afraid to go look at expired listings in that neighborhood that they're looking in and reach out to the seller directly. You can, or even the agent if you can't find the seller's info, and just say, hey, I have a buyer, would they still be interested in selling? So just think of creative ways to find properties that are on the market, especially for those weak buyers or even the moderate ones who are just unable to compete or just sick of competing, that they want to find something where there's no competition. A great way to do that is with homes that are off the market.
Yeah, that's a big one. So being able to think outside the box and find properties other than the traditional MLS. So, and think about that too. If you go and door knock a neighbor, your buyer has a couple of subdivisions they love, like we would love to be in this subdivision, and you go door knock it, and that person says, yeah, we're thinking about selling, and then you get your buyers in there, they fall in love with it, they make an offer, they get it accepted. Do you think they're gonna be a client for life? Probably. You went above and beyond to find something. Now they're not competing in multiple offer situations. You could potentially represent the seller as well and double-sided and you'll work as a dual agent. So there are a lot of benefits to just thinking differently. To your point too, expireds, canceled, properties that were on the market previously, even a year, 2, 3 years ago that maybe didn't sell or beyond, you could try to potentially track down those sellers and see if they're interested in selling them. Think about a seller that was on the market pre-2020, they wouldn't get an offer like they would today. They wouldn't get an offer then like they would today. So if you look at properties that were on the market in the past, and the other thing too is so many people think the market is not good right now from the general public standpoint because interest rates are high. Like at Easter, everyone's like, oh, the market's terrible, isn't it? No. If you're a buyer, it is, right? But if you're a seller, it's not. And if you're a buyer, it's not even a terrible market. It's just finding the right properties to get them in place. But from a seller standpoint, it's a fantastic market. And I think that's the important thing to remember too, is that right now, there's no good market, no bad market. It's just markets. So in 08, everyone says that was a terrible market. It wasn't if you were a home buyer or an investor. If you were a seller, it wasn't an ideal market because there was so much inventory, pricing fell significantly. But if you were a home buyer, what a great time to buy a house. All the homes were on sale. So it wasn't a bad market from a buyer or an investment perspective. It was just a bad market from the seller. This market could be considered a quote unquote bad market for a buyer because interest rates aren't 2.5% anymore, which really rates at 6.5%. The historical average for interest rates is 8%. So we're still way under. Like when I got into the industry in 05, 6.5% was what the rates were. That was considered a fantastic interest rate. Everyone was like, oh, I can't believe rates are 6. They went to 6.5. Now they went to 6%. People were going crazy because they were coming out of the 90s where it was 12% and 13% and all of that. Yeah. And so those decades where they were significantly higher. So keeping that in mind as well is that with interest rates too, with our buyers as well, if we go find properties that were on the market for a while and we can get seller paid closing costs, well now too, we might be able to do a 2-1 buy down where we can have the seller give enough credit to buy down their interest rate for the first 2 years where their payment can get lower. So that's something too, like if let's say they're not a super well qualified borrower, but if interest rates are 6.5% and we can go get a $10,000 closing cost credit depending on the property price, maybe we can do a 2-1 buy down where they're at 4.5% for the first year, 5.5% for the second, and then it goes to the prime rate after that. But they could, at that point, chances are interest rates may go down in the next 2 years where they could refinance and lock into the lower rate. And then whatever money that was additional money that was going to be used for the buy down would apply to the principal. So different things like that, and looking at properties maybe that are sitting out there a little bit longer to get them a better rate, to get them a better monthly payment, because typically too, people are buying a monthly payment. That's the same with cars. Like just bought a car recently. When you walk in, first thing I ask is, where do you want your payment to be? That's all they want to figure out is where you want your payment. And that's typically with home buying too. People are buying a payment They're not necessarily buying a purchase price. So figuring out where they're comfortable with their payment as well, if we can find a property that's been on the market for a while, where we can get some closing costs to do a buy down. Maybe they can look a little bit higher in price point because their payment's gonna be lower for the first 2 years. So it's just thinking differently, thinking creatively around how do we go find properties and really set our buyers up to win? Not just seeing the first, property hit the market today, there's 50 showings, and we just have to be one of the 26 offers that are gonna come in. So another thing too, like what we do a lot here is circle prospecting, where we're calling around neighborhoods, to see if people would consider selling. So it's doing like that, where, as Joe mentioned, figuring out how we can go find people and find homes before they even go to the market. Because if you can find a buyer of a home before it goes to the market, they're gonna love it. Any
Don't
other
be afraid,
thoughts?
yeah, I was gonna say, don't be afraid to put people on your brokerage too, because there's probably a lot of agents in your brokerage that have listings that are on the market or coming soon, that'd be happy to get your buyers in there, before it goes on the market. So don't be shy when, when it comes to your brokerage, feel free to reach out to people, let everybody know that, hey, I have a buyer looking in this area. What listings do you have that are coming on that could be a good fit? Because with that MLS exempt form, it gives us the ability to basically show homes to our buyers within the walls of the brokerage. So it's a great way to show off market properties as well.
Absolutely it is. Any other thoughts or questions, challenges anybody's been facing?
Are you seeing or sending any love letters anymore?
People do it. What do you guys
People
think?
do it. Some people say no love letters, no escalation clauses, they don't want all that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. A heartfelt letter to the seller saying, oh, I love your.
Like why they should pick those,
I can
why
see
they
my
should pick
family
you. Yeah.
growing to your home.
I was gonna say, I've done it before and
Sometimes it works.
sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, one thing that my buyers have done though that's worked pretty well is they actually like look the sellers up on Facebook, because obviously you can see their name on the seller's disclosure. So they'll look them up on Facebook and kind of stalk them a little bit and kind of be like, what do they like? Like, are they into sports? Are they into like the military? What are they into? And then try to craft that letter around whatever theme it is to try to appeal to them. So that can be effective too, because then it's someone who's very relatable to that person. They're like, oh, this person loves sports. I love sports. Love to sell to them. Or they love nature. I love nature. Let's sell it to them. So it's another way to try to pull the heartstrings.
I've seen it backfire in
Yeah.
the past, where like the agent would send a love letter and the client got upset. It was weird. They got really upset. Well, no, they got really upset that they were trying to like manipulate them, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I've had that happen a couple times where it backfires. I don't know.
Well, didn't NAR come out with saying that it be discriminatory and that you weren't supposed to use those letters?
Did they?
Yeah, I believe so. So because it's like, there's a lot of guidelines in that where basing acceptance upon.
Like
certain-
family versus,
Yeah, familial status, things like that. So, yeah, you have to be very careful with those things. People still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is just having the conversation with the realtor before you submit the offer. Letting them know I've got a well qualified borrower, they love the home, they're prepared to make an offer, and they want to do whatever we can do possible to get the offer accepted. What terms are your sellers looking for? What's an ideal closing date? Other than price, what are they looking for? So having that conversation then to be able to relay that to your buyer to really structure the offer as in favor of the seller as possible, because that's what we have to do. The seller definitely has the upper hand right now if they have 10 offers on the table. If they just went to the market and they have 50 showings, they have multiple offers coming in, the seller has the upper hand certainly. So we need to figure out what's really important to that seller so you can structure the offer to help get it accepted for your buyer.
I have a question. If as listings, if you have a listing, if you get contracts, would you always take a conventional loan over an FHA or VA? If everything's equal,
All the other terms are equal.
yeah. Would
You know, I
always
think
take a
I would
conventional?
call the lender
Uh-huh.
and ask them, how is this?
That's a really good point. So that's something I forgot to mention. Make sure your lender is calling the listing agent as well. So make sure your lender does a phone call to the listing agent and explains how well qualified the borrower is. That helps a lot too. Because they let them know, hey, so-and-so is a great realtor, they're a great person to work with. The borrower is super well qualified, we've already gone through the whole process. So that's a very strong touch as well that a lot of people aren't doing. That's going to put that listing agent at ease. They can relay that to the seller that now they've spoken to you. Your buyer loves the home, they've spoken to the lender. So that's a very important thing to do as well.
I actually had a seller who was veterans and they took a VA over conventional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see
because
that. Yeah,
That was important to them.
sure.
Yes. So.
Yeah, it's gonna be important. So I think anything else you think of? Yeah. We went through a lot, we covered a lot, but the biggest thing is just communication, in my opinion. It's communication and then figure out how to structure the offer based on the communication you've had with the listing agent and what's ultimately important to the seller and what you can do to make the offer as strong as possible. But having a really good buyer's consultation and preparing your buyer for the market that we're currently in, and preparing them that you may have to be willing to pay over asking, because there's nothing worse than going and showing them a house and they say, well, it's 300,000. Say, well, it's offered 290. It just went on the market today. There's 57 people on the sign-in sheet, and there's 10 offers on the table and they want to offer 290, 10,000 they're asking. It's not going to happen, but they would do that because we haven't taken the time to educate them on the market. So being able to have a really good buyer consultation, prepare them for the market that we're in and how we can set them up to win is going to be very important. So I think if you do that and then get comfortable with using the terminology, using escalation clauses, being able to explain that. I think also when you submit offers, having a cover letter in the email, explaining the highlights of the offer, because this agent's going to get 25 different offers. You don't want to get lost in the shuffle. That's why it's so important to have keep in touch with the agent as well, so that it doesn't just go to their spam box, because that happens a lot too. An offer will go to the spam, they didn't even see it because the agent didn't call, didn't text, didn't do anything to let them know an offer was coming over. They have 26 other offers, they didn't even see yours because it didn't even hit their inbox. So all things that are very important, and making it as easy as possible for the listing agent to be able to understand your offer and relay that information to the seller is going to be very important. And it's going to set you apart from all of the other agents that are out there that aren't doing that. Any other thoughts or questions? Is it helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That's all we've got. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.